Premed Office Hours episode 182. It is the session with the guys today. Dr. Scott Wright, former director of admissions at UT Southwestern, retired executive director at TMDSAS. That is you.
Yes,
How you
yes,
doing, my
yes.
fine sir?
I'm doing well, doing well. It's good to see you, Ryan. It's always good to be here with all the people out there. So, yeah.
all the people, all the little people.
Yes,
Some would
the
say the
thousands
smallest
and
people.
millions and
Awesome. Well, Dr. Scott Wright, I'm so excited to have you here. You are
yes.
the original member of the medical school HQ advising team when we did create a team, and it wasn't just me anymore. So
Yeah.
excited to chat with you.
Yeah.
And for
Yeah.
those who don't know who I am, Dr. Ryan Gray, founder of the medical school headquarters, author of the Premed Playbook series, host of the Premed Years podcast, the MCAT podcast, the Old Premeds podcast, all those podcast things, co-founder at mapped.com. That is me. And we are here to answer your questions. The biggest thing to remember is we are here answering your questions here almost every Wednesday at 1 p.m. Eastern. This is your time to get your pre-med questions answered. But Dr. Wright, a lot of times students have very personal questions or very nuanced questions that make it hard for them to ask here. We do one-on-one advising, right? And we do a lot of that with our a team of advisors. Use the code PMOH to save on some advising sessions, whether it's a one-time session, some essay editing. PMOH will save you some money at medicalschoolhq.net/advising for that. So let's rock and roll. For those of you, again, who are new here, ask your questions over at premed.tv. We'll answer them here on the show. Karan asks, Dr. Gray talked to an applicant. Dr. Gray talked to an applicant with lots of EMT experience who was more involved in pre-hospital care and didn't work with docs. Would you recommend becoming an ER tech instead of an EMT to observe docs more? Interesting question, Dr. Wright. This is a common question that I get from students who will say, oh, my experience isn't good because I'm not with doctors, right? They may have phenomenal clinical experience, I think, but the student is mostly with maybe PAs or nurses and not with doctors. And so they don't think it's valuable experience. From your point of view, what makes good clinical experience? Being with doctors, or is it the patient interaction, regardless of who's supervising?
Yeah, I think it's definitely the latter. I think definitely the patient is the center of all activity clinically. And so when you get patient contact, that's what's most valuable, I think. Now, that doesn't mean that you avoid contact with doctors. That's what shadowing is all about. Some clinical work is very doctor uh, oriented. So, for example, as an MA, very doctor oriented, to kind of depending a little bit on the setting of the MA job. But there are other things where, like a patient care technician at a lot of hospitals, where they're not supervised by a doctor. They're supervised typically by a nurse, and who is instructing them in what to do. But you're getting contact with the patients, and so I definitely think that you know you want to seek out patient centered experiences, and that's where keeping track of what you're doing with those patients, what the reflections that you have on what that has meant to you can be very important.
Yes. So, Karan, get that experience. Being an EMT is typically phenomenal experience if that's something you enjoy. And I want to mention that, right, Scott, because I think a lot of students are like, oh, other people are being an EMT, so I should be an EMT. And then the student realizes they don't like that sort of environment. where there's a lot of unknown. It's maybe a little bit faster
Mm-hmm.
paced than they prefer. And it's like, no, like choose the experience that you're going to thrive in, the one that
Absolutely.
fits your personality. And maybe it's not being an EMT. Maybe it's being a hospice care kind of volunteer, something like that.
That's right. Yep. Absolutely.
Good. All right. Good question. Keep them coming. Andres, what are some key differences in the timelines between the 3 application services? I got a solid grasp on AMCAS, but wondering by how much the other 2 differ by. All right, I'll tackle this one because I literally was just talking about this one. I think yesterday I was recording some videos for Maps, our platform. We're going through a redesign. So, Andres, the key differences really are in submission timing. I think is really the biggest thing. So AMCAS, all 3 application services open up at the beginning of May. So kind of that first week of May, AMCAS, ACOMAS, TMDSAS say, hey, we're open for the new cycle. Come one, come all, create an account, put in your information. The difference timeline-wise is typically the submission timeline. AMCAS, you can't submit until historically we say June 1st. The last few years, last several years, it's been end of May when you can start to submit your AMCAS application. And then there's even a further delay between when you submit and when schools can start to get applications. That is typically the third week or end of June is when AMCAS says, okay, schools, come get the applications. So between submitting end of May, if you're submitting pretty early, and end of June, there's nothing that you're going to hear from those AMCAS schools because the schools don't know that you've applied to them yet. So that's AMCAS timing, at least from submission. TMDSAS timing changed a couple years ago. TMDSAS timing used to be as soon as the application cycle opened, you could submit it. And Scott, you worked at TMDSAS. We're still friends with people that are at TMDSAS. And get into a loop there and you can't get out. And we have heard horror stories of students that mistakenly submit an application with the personal statement basically saying, put personal statement here. The student's like making a note and then they forget to actually put the personal statement in. And then they submit it. And that's it. The TMDSAS is not going to say, oh, we understand you made a mistake. Sorry. So I don't know if the delay in submission now that TMDSAS has is kind of a reaction to kind of forcing students to slow down a little bit. That's my guess, potentially. But TMDSAS, you can't submit until mid-May typically. There's a couple week delay between when the application cycle opens and when you can submit your TMDSAS application. Schools get the TMDSAS application relatively quickly. After that, there's a different verification process that goes on. Schools get it, secondary start to come. ACOMAS timing used to be very similar to AMCAS timing until last year. They changed it where ACOMAS now opens beginning of May, just like the other ones, and you submit immediately. You can submit immediately now. There's no delay in submission. There's no delay for when schools are going to get it. And so it's a very different process. You can start to get secondaries mid-May now. Yeah, things are much more sped up. So those are really the big differences. And obviously TMDSAS has the pre-match process and match process. We don't need to dive into all that. Any other kind of big differences that you can think of, Scott, off the top of your head?
No, I think those are the major differences that'll be relevant to the student. So I think you covered it well.
All right. Good question. The Nintendo man. How many letters of rec are too many? I have quite a few, but didn't know if too many can be a bad thing. Scott, is too much of a good thing a bad thing?
It can be. What I think you want to think about is what those letters are meant to communicate, and really focus your attention on who you want to choose to write letters to communicate certain things. So, for example, and the most basic example of that is you would get a your PI or something at the research lab to write a letter about your research experiences, about your diligence, and show up on time, and all the basics and stuff. You want an academic, the professors to be able to address your academic skills in the classroom. So you're pointing certain things in certain directions. Now, to the relevant issue here of too many, after a while, most schools limit the number you can have. But I think on AMCAS you can have like a whole bunch. I can't remember, but anyway, the point here is,
I think it's 10. You can have up to 10.
yeah, I mean that's a lot of letters, and sometimes the medical school can look at that and go, why what is he compensating for? What's going
It's like
what's happening here?
driving one of those big trucks in Texas.
Big,
what are you compensating for?
Exactly. Oh God. Oh.
Sorry to derail the conversation there.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know where to go with that now. So.
Yeah, I think the answer, as always, unfortunately, is it depends on the school, right? Some schools will have like minimum, maximum in terms of numbers of letters. The big thing here to remember, Nintendo Man 64, is that there are differences in the application services. AMCAS, you can pick and choose what letters go to what schools. So you can upload 10 letters, which is the maximum for AMCAS. You can upload 10 letters to AMCAS. And then if you're applying to 20 schools, send 3 letters to one school, 2 letters to another school, 4 letters to one school. You can pick and choose, which I think is fantastic and gives you the opportunity. I talk about a game that you can play potentially with if you have a mentor or someone you've shadowed who is an alumnus or alumni of a specific medical school. They can write a specific letter to that school saying, hey, University of Florida, I graduated from your medical school. I think Sally here is going to be a fantastic medical student. She's going to fit into our school perfectly. I would be glad to call her a colleague, whatever. And you can have that one person write a very specific letter to one school and then a generic letter to all the other schools. And you can play that game of submitting that one letter to that one school. A COMIS and TMDSIS, all the letters go to all the schools. So you can't play that game, and you have to be a little more careful with that.
Right.
So, yeah, typically I would shoot for hitting the minimum. And then just if you like dying to give one more letter because you think it's going to help, go for it. But yeah,
not too many.
These admissions committees have a lot of stuff they're looking at. You don't need to
because I've seen examples through AMCAS of a school of a medical school that got a committee letter that had 6 letters in it, and then the students submitted another 5 letters outside of those 6 that were in the committee letter. It's like, what's going on here?
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah, there's a lot.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, Aman.
That's a 350 right
there. With a big lift kit on there.
Yes,
I'm having a hard time getting started on my personal statement because I don't know how to really channel what my story is. Do you have any advice? Well, Scott, that's where potentially having a half-hour session with one of our advisors, using that code PMOH to save some money, pre-med office hours, that's what PMOH is huge. Also, if they haven't read yet, there's a book written by some dude, Premed Playbook, Guide to the Medical School Personal Statement, that is all about telling your story, figuring out how to tell your story. So check that out as well. When people are stuck here, Scott, what do you think is the typical sticking point, if there is one?
I think sometimes, I hope this doesn't shock any of you out there listening, but in my experience, many of you pre-meds are overthinkers. And so I think that
No.
sometimes your head gets in the way of your heart. You know,
Mm,
what I really want to see on the page, in terms of your personal statement, is show me your heart. Where is your heart? What do you want to do, and what is this all about to you? And they get so in their head, uh, that they forget about what is my heart saying here. And so what I often encourage students to do is to just begin making a list, sentences, phrases, whatever, just of what is this all about to me? If I had to think about, is it about serving, underserved populations? And if that's what it's about, what are the underserved populations that I'm interested in? If it's about, I had a student recently who was really all about affirming care for LGBTQ students and for patients, and really, that was a heart throb issue for that applicant. And so, I think it's about kind of connecting with what is this all about to me, in my heart of hearts. What is this all about? And then to be able to begin thinking about, how do I communicate that to somebody who doesn't know me, who doesn't know who I am, or what I'm all about. But just begin to get connected with your own sort of heart and soul of who you are and what you're all about, and then begin to put some of that on paper, not in narrative form necessarily, but just get it out of your head, out of your being, out into an objective source, so that you can begin then to struggle with, what does this mean to me? And then you can begin to communicate that to the reader through what you're writing. But until then, sometimes it's a bit of a struggle for yourself. So, does that make sense, Ryan? And I don't know if that's.
yeah, it makes a ton of sense. And I think that's exactly what students
Yeah,
struggle with is
yeah.
all of that stuff. So, yeah, uh, I changed a little code at the bottom there, not code, the little language, right? Just schedule a brainstorming session to help
Yeah.
kind of figure that out. Look, I think a lot of people, and we were talking about this just before we jumped on, a lot of students struggle with what we call, right, the storytelling aspect of their
Mhm,
application. They lean on the stats to quote unquote tell the
mhm,
story. And I was
mhm,
sharing a post from a group that I'm in. A kid had a 3.995 20, I think, MCAT score. Um, and the it was 399 519 MCAT score. Only one interview. And I
mhm.
think everyone is shocked to see that. Right? They're like, I had no idea. I figured it was gonna be a breeze. And you and I look at that and go, yeah, like, I can probably guarantee what I'm gonna see in this application.
Yep,
And
yep.
so that's why we stress so much, not that stats don't matter, but it's not just stats that matter, right?
Mhm,
There's a
mhm,
difference in that language, right? It's not
mhm,
just stats. Stats matter, but it's not just stats. And that's where kind of our philosophy of storytelling comes out is I'm
mhm,
going to help you extract the best story for you to help you tell your most authentic
mhm,
self, show your most authentic self in your application, because that's what we think is what's going to connect the person reading it to go, oh my gosh, this is a normal human being who's super passionate about going down this journey. I can see that. I can understand it. I want to talk to them. And I
mhm.
think a lot of students and a lot of parents are out there thinking, my kid is a 4.0 student with almost a perfect MCAT score. They're going to get in. And it's like, there's so much more, so much more. So,
Mhm, mhm. That's right.
yeah, reach out to us. That's what we help with. So you don't go through an application process with near perfect stats and end up disappointed, because it happens more than you
Yep,
think, unfortunately.
yep, yep, it does.
Emery. I'm currently working as a firefighter. Does this count as good experience on a medical school application? How would this work out? Scott, this is a very common question. Let me rephrase the question they're really asking, right? Does this count as good experience? They're saying, will this help my medical school application? Will this help me stand out on a medical school application? Is this the first person ever applying to medical school who is a firefighter?
No. This is not unusual. I think that at least in many, if not most, fire departments these days, you have to be at least an EMT, sometimes even a paramedic to even be in the department. And so, that changes the dynamic of it often. If that's your sole experience, then that would be problematic. I think you want to have a broader sense of what medicine is all about. You want to. It's certainly not going to be a bad thing, but it's not going to be something that you can just say, "Oh, I'm a firefighter," and that's all I do. That I don't think that would hack it, but I do think it could be, certainly going to be a part of your experiences and something that hopefully you'll be telling some stories about, how meaningful it was for you to be a firefighter and what things that you had done, but also what you gained from those experiences.
Yeah. We harp on this all the time. It's not what you did, it's how it affected you, how you affected it, how you reflect on it, the what you're able to tell someone about that experience, not just, look, I was a firefighter.
Right.
Give me credit, right? Look at me. So
it's not about
cancer.
I was thinking about that a few minutes ago when we were talking. It's not about the resume. The resume is a part of what you're going to be presenting to the admissions committees through the application, but it goes way deeper than just the resume. If you're depending on your resume, then that's a problem. It's got to go deeper than that. It's got to be the meaning part. What did this mean to me? These experiences.
Same thing with stats, right? It's not the resume, it's not the stats, it's the meaning, it's the story. I lean on story. That's the word that I go to. And it's just, I don't know how much we can scream from the rooftops, but one of these days, and the students that we work with understand that, because I literally just got an email this morning, not even this morning, like 20 minutes ago when we jumped on. Let me pull it up because it highlights this, right? It was sent 40 minutes ago. The subject is, I got the MD acceptance, right? I understand students are still kind of separate MD versus DO, and so they think getting that MD acceptance is better. So I got the MD acceptance. I just wanted to share that I got my first MD acceptance of the cycle. I have one more MD interview coming up in a couple weeks. The odds certainly weren't in my favor, as I was a late non-trad applicant, submitted primaries 9/26. Secondaries in late September, early to mid-October, with mediocre stats, 502 MCAT, 3.4 cumulative GPA, but had a 3.95 postback, right? That's the story that matters there. I'm not a 3.4 student. I'm a 3.95 student. I wholeheartedly believe my activity descriptions, the story, the meaning, my letters of rec, and personal statement are the highlight of my application, as I took your advice, show, don't tell. I've been a loyal subscriber since 2018, read all of your books. Application Academy has been such a great resource this past year. So this is an Application Academy student. Application Academy is our group coaching program. I didn't even know this was an Academy student. I didn't look at the name. I just was looking at the words. Application Academy is our group coaching program, applicationacademy.com. Let me see if I have a banner to throw up there for that, applicationacademy.com. So this student is saying, hey, I wasn't the best stat-wise, but I didn't lean on that, right? I wasn't expecting to lean on my stats because I knew what my stats were, although they had a 3.95 postback, which is fantastic. But they used the meaning, the story, the reflections in their descriptions, in their personal statement. I was freaking out during the days leading up to my MMI, but I absolutely loved it, right? We do MMI prep in Application Academy. Took your advice, presented myself authentically. I didn't rehearse my answers or follow a specific formula. Beautiful. Chef's kiss.
Yes.
Right?
Oh, I love
Clearly,
it.
it
Yeah.
worked out for me. Hoping I can share a second MD acceptance next month. So, fan-freaking-tastic. Great,
That's
great
awesome.
Application Academy win there.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, I had another student in Academy this past year. This was her fourth application cycle.
Oh, man.
And she had tried 3 times previously, and she had decided, I'm going to try it one more time. She was in Application Academy, and damn it, if she didn't get in, and she has 4 acceptances this year, and
Who
super
is this person?
excited for her.
I don't know this person. We need to get her
Yeah,
on the podcast.
yeah, she's awesome. She's really great, and just so exciting for her. Yeah.
Okay. And you have another student who had like another Application Academy student,
Mm-hmm.
14 interviews, going to
14
UT
interviews.
Southwestern,
Yep.
your
Yep.
former school.
Yep.
Yeah, Application
Yep.
Academy. I think Application Academy, we created kind of out of necessity because I was doing a lot of one-on-one advising. And as we were continuing to grow this team, I didn't have time to do that. So I'm like, let's figure out a way that I can still do advising, but in a little bit of a different format. And Application Academy was born from that.
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
has been fantastic.
Yep.
I think students love it. It's the most affordable thing that we offer, but also probably the most in-depth. The big difference that scares students from Application Academy is it's not one-on-one, but there's still plenty of opportunities to get direct feedback from our advisors, multiple sessions a week, all that kind of stuff.
And I think that sometimes the best sort of advice and the best feedback that you get is from your peers in academy, where they'll say, we'll be going over their essay or something, and they'll say, one of the other students will say, well, I don't understand this part, or I read that part totally differently, and I read it like this, and everybody's like, whoa, yeah, I see that now. And so that can be super super helpful.
Yep. 100%. 100%. Good. So here's a great kind of question here. So kind of picking up on our meaning, storytelling, reflection kind of feedback for an activity description where this person's a research assistant. Any advice on how to write a narrative on a research assistant experience? I think, Scott, one of the biggest misinterpretations, or maybe I just don't give enough nuance and context when I talk about this stuff, is that students think you have to have a story for everything. But not everything has a story to tell.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so what is a way potentially for Calixto here to write a reflective experience description that maybe isn't in a narrative form that's a little more storytelling?
Yeah, so I think that it could go in several directions. I mean, I think one of the things that you want to think about, Calixto, is to really is to think about, what did I learn in my research experience. Just basically, just list out some things that you learned. I learned how to, and it could be very granular. I learned how to order these things. I learned how to, work on a grant proposal. I learned how to, do X, Y, and Z, whatever they are. It could be basic stuff. I learned how to, and then you can get into personal things. I learned how to work effectively with students from around the world, researchers from around the world. Because, my experience is that labs can be an amazingly diverse place where you are, and you're working with people from various countries, from various cultures. Anyway, so so list out, what are the things that I learned out of this experience. What do I want to focus that on? And maybe there's a story that is lends itself to being presented about diversity. It could be a story about it could be a story about, teamwork and kind of what you learned about, the teamwork aspect of the lab experience for you. It could be a variety of things, but it has to be centered in authentic reality for you. What was that experience about for you? And then you communicate that through the narrative. But I think sometimes what we get students doing is they sit down to write these essays or the activity descriptions, and they sit down in front of a white piece of paper, or they sit down in front of the blank document on their computer screen, and they're like, um, I don't know where to start. But you got to start with what did I get out of this? You can't tell a story that you haven't sort of created in your mind what that story is.
Yeah. I love one of our colleagues, Dina Golini, who's part of our medical school HQ advising team. We had a conversation because she was an admissions officer at Stanford, reviewing applications and being involved in the admissions process at Stanford Medical School. And one of her key comments, because I asked her straightforward, I'm like, there are students who are very aspirational. They want to get into Stanford. They want to get into Yale. They want to get into Harvard, whatever. And the question that I asked was, what is it about these students, right? There are plenty of students out there with 4.0s and near perfect MCAT scores. What is it about the students that make it through the process at a Stanford, at a Harvard, whatever, that makes them quote unquote stand out? And she was very quick. She's like, oh, it's an easy answer. She said, it's when you're reading an application, you can tell the students who have had an impact in the lives of the people they're interacting with.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's not just
Mm-hmm.
what you're doing. So going back to that
Yep.
earlier question of like, I've been a firefighter. Is that good? I don't know. Like, do you just sit and twiddle your thumbs? Like, I don't know. Right. And so being a research assistant, how can you show the impact that you've had on
Mm-hmm.
those around you, whether it's the patients, whether it's the processes, whether it's your colleagues, whatever that is, show the impact that you have on
Mm-hmm.
things and people and stuff around you. And that was just her answer. And so I've started talking about, right, a lot of people go to this X factor, right? A very generic kind of statement that's often used in college admissions and carried over into medical school admissions is, oh, you have to have an X factor to get into Stanford. And Dina's like, no, and I kind of changed the language. It's an impact factor, right? It's not an X factor. It's not the one thing that nobody else has done. It's the impact factor. How can you show who you are as a person on those people around you? No matter what experience you're doing.
Yep. Absolutely.
So, hopefully that helps.
Yeah.
All right. Great questions today.
Yeah, a lot of good ones.
Gloria, is it too early to start writing secondaries now if I have my primary application at a semi-solid point applying this summer? So, Scott, as we're recording this, it's near the end of January. Applications open up in May. Gloria's on top of things. She's got her primary application. It's personal statements, activity descriptions. Is there such thing as too early to start working on secondaries if you're primaries?
I have a little bit of mixed feelings about this. One is it depends a little bit on what you're doing right now. I mean, if you're involved in a fairly extensive amount of research experience or clinical experiences, you're working or you're volunteering or stuff, you may want to back off of some of that until you get closer to May, because there may be experiences that you're having right now that you ultimately want those to be a part of what you're saying in either the primary or the secondaries. Now, having said that, there are certain questions on secondary applications that may not change very much. A good example of that would be the diversity question that's pretty ubiquitous in the process, where the question is essentially, how are you going to bring diversity to our class in broad sense of things. So that may not change. So I would say you pick and choose, but don't get too stuck in what you're in stories and things, because those may, you may want to change those. I don't want you to spend a whole lot of time working on something and then you end up having to backtrack because something else happened that you really want to cover. So, I would say you could start, kind of fiddling around with them and stuff, but, do it lightly.
Yeah. Do it lightly. Secondaryapps.com has all of the secondary applications. Most schools don't change them year to year, so go check those out. Do I have a banner for that? Let me see. Secondaryapps.com. I do. Secondaryapps.com.
Oh, awesome.
There you go.
There you
go. All right. Let's keep rocking here.
You are the king of the URL.
got them all. Yeah. Salma, do you have any tips for someone who is struggling with prereqs other than reflecting why you failed or what's not working? Because I have no idea even how. So Dr. writes, Salma, looks like she's struggling with classes. Look, there is no easy way to kind of tell someone, hey, here's why you're struggling, because there are a million reasons why someone could be struggling. So Salma, for you, I think you just have to understand, what are the common reasons? Are you doing too much, right? Do you have too many responsibilities outside of school, whether it's work or extracurriculars, all of that fun stuff? Do you have too much going on? Are you taking too many classes? Are you struggling because you have a learning disorder, disability that you don't know about yet? You'd be surprised how many times a student comes to me and goes, Dr. Gray, I was just diagnosed with dyslexia. I had no idea. Now I know why I could do perfectly fine with my teacher quizzing me verbally. But as soon as I sat down to take the test, I struggled because I struggled reading the words. So there's so many reasons that it's really hard to give an answer. So the question, Salma, is, are you going to office hours, assuming your professor holds office hours or TA holds office hours? Are you using all of the free resources, tutoring resources, et cetera, that potentially a learning center at your school has? Are you reaching out to other private tutors to help you? Is this every class or is it a specific class? There's so many questions to go down to figure out potentially what's going wrong there. So good luck. Carson the Kid, dual enrollment is one of those things, Scott, that is kind of a double-edged sword. You feel like you're speeding things along to go get through college faster / cheaper. But then a lot of people don't understand that those dual enrollment credits count towards your college GPA and can kind of derail the process. The good thing that I think about with dual enrollment is that they're early and you typically have some time to make up. So Carson here, I got 2 Fs during dual enrollment. Currently, I am a sophomore. In my spring, I have a 3.1 and I have a strong GPA trend. If I get all A's the rest of my undergrad, I will finish with a 3.6. The question, is this a bad look? Scott, someone who has a story, that their GPA, their data points, the story is struggled early, succeeded late. Is that bad?
No, no, not at all. I think trends are really important. A lot of schools are more frequently now than at any time in my history with the process, are really focusing on the last 60 hours even. Post-bac hours obviously are seen distinctively. So I think that this is not an insurmountable problem. Carson, what I would say is you've got some work ahead of you. I understand what you're saying about if I make all A's the rest of undergrad, I'll finish with a 3.6. I think that's a laudable goal and certainly something that you need to really work hard toward. Don't get discouraged if you don't get all A's from here on out. If there's what is that you can't afford uh, to do anything less than A's on a regular basis. So you want to really focus on the coursework, but this is not something that you cannot overcome. You can do this, and you can be successful in this process.
Yep. Good luck, Carson the kid.
Yeah, good luck.
That's a perfect example there. If someone came and was like, "Oh,
Yeah.
I have a 3.6." Well, what does that mean? What does that mean? And this
Hmm.
this tells a great story of overcoming.
Hmm.
So good.
Sure does. Sure does.
Mohammed, I'm a certified medical interpreter. A good, perfect language there. A lot of people call them translators. You're an interpreter.
Yeah.
How do medical schools view this type of experience, knowing that language proficiency represents one of the major communication barriers in healthcare? So, Dr. Wright,
Hmm.
this
Hmm.
is a very
Hmm.
interesting question because the question is asked in a way that's basically going back to, hey, I'm a firefighter. Is that going to make me look good? Hey, I'm an interpreter. Interpreter. Is that going to make me look good? How do you answer this one?
Well, I answer it in much the same way as I did the firefighter one. Actually, it's
Yep.
very similar. It's about the story. What I don't want to know is that I'm a certified medical interpreter. Okay, I can see that on your resume. That's a resume thing. What I want to know is, so what? Who cares?
Mhm.
Why is this meaningful to you? What have you learned out of the experience? And communicate that to me. That's what I was referring to earlier when we talked about getting down underneath the resume and telling me, what was this all about for you? You're talking about something that is very applicable. The fact that language proficiency is a major barrier in healthcare in America today. Language issues, cultural issues represent a major issue for us in this country. And so, what I want to know is getting down underneath that. What are you learning about this, and the meaning of this, and how are you, processing that in terms of what are you going to communicate to me as an admissions committee about what this has meant to you. So just get underneath that and talk about how this is meaningful. But I'm not saying you sounded this way too much in your question. Do not get preachy about it.
Yeah.
Do not get so that all of a sudden you think you're somehow the enlightened one, and the admissions committee. I'm not suggesting you would do that, Mohammed, but I'm saying I've seen that before, where applicants have there's something they're passionate about, and but the way it comes across is a little bit snarky. So don't want to be
Yeah.
snarky.
I would even take it a step further. Sometimes it comes across as blaming current healthcare providers not
Yes.
taking it
Yes.
seriously, and I'm the one that's going to
Mhm.
solve the problem.
Yep. Yep. Don't
Yeah.
want to do that.
Yep. See that plenty. Team 7, very common question. Does attending a community college impact my likelihood of being accepted into medical school? Dr. Scott writes, community college. I hate this question. Not to say that it shouldn't be asked. I hate the question because there are still schools out there that
Yep.
kind of turn their
Yep.
nose up at community college.
Yep.
What it, big picture, is community college an issue?
Uh, Big picture, typically not, but it
Yeah.
can be if the key here for community college applicants, applicants that have been through a time in community college during their process, is there have to be consistency. There has to be consistency in terms of the grading. So what my experience is in terms of what medical schools are going to do with really anything, and specifically here related to community college work, is they're going to look at how did you do at the community college and how did you do at the university. And if there's a big drop, if you were doing 4.0 work at the community college, and then you go to university and all of a sudden you're at a 3.4, then that could be problematic. what they're looking for is to say, what kind of student are you? And if you're consistently a good student, then my experience says there are no issues with community college work. But it's about the consistency.
Yeah. And oftentimes community college first, which is a very standard process of high school,
Mm-hmm.
community college, then 4-year university, keeping that consistency alive is
Mm-hmm.
less of an issue than for some schools, less of an issue than going to a 4-year university and then going to community college either to
Yes.
fix a GPA, because then there's some
Yes.
questions of like,
Yeah. Big
what's going on?
questions. Yep.
So
Yep. Yep.
yeah. Question here. One of my friends, I have a friend that's saying that shadowing is clinical experience. No, it is not. Shadowing is shadowing. Clinical experience is clinical experience. Shadowing is passive. Clinical experience is active. The easiest way to know that shadowing is not clinical experience, they're different on the application. They're different categories.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah.
Again, Dr. Wright, Scott, it's the end of January. Is there still hope for an interview invite at this stage of the game?
Yes, slim, slim, slim. It's
Slim
getting
Shady?
slimmer and slimmer and slimmer. Uh, I mean, I think there is still some, maybe at a few schools around the country, but I would say for the majority of schools, if you haven't heard back from by now, it's not good.
Yeah.
Sorry, Rainier.
Yeah. So you're saying there's a chance. uh, hey, Gene says, I'm graduating this semester, taking a gap year, hoping to apply this coming cycle. I have a pretty short but long-term resume. Short but long-term resume. Should I take 2 gap years to build my resume or apply? Hey, Gene, it is impossible to answer based on that information. Use Mapped, mapped.com. Put in all of your activities, put in your grades, all of that good stuff. And then you can reach out if you don't have a Mapped account yet. Signing up for an account gives you access to Mapped Pro for a couple weeks, and you can ask our advisors based on all of that data. We'll have a better idea of how to answer that question. Interesting. Mayra, how do medical schools see doing research in a different state from where you live during the summer? Who cares? Yeah.
I don't think it matters.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've never heard that was an issue.
Yep.
And you
Doesn't
get a
matter.
good research job in the summer, I don't think it matters where it is.
Yeah.
You know, I think
Let's take the summer question a little bit further, Scott. It very often students will go off to school away from home, and then the summers come home, and that's when they'll do their shadowing. That's when they'll do their clinical
mhm,
experience, and
mhm,
then they go
mhm.
back to school. They stop all of their activities and focus on school. Can that be a potential issue when students have just the summers for their activities?
Um, it can be an issue. It depends on, what the whole application looks like. Um, I always was a little concerned when a student only did clinical work, for example, when it was convenient for them. When, in the summer, I'm not in classes, I don't have, XYZ activities. And so I can devote my summer to clinical activities, shadowing or whatever. And then outside of that, I'm going to be just my school self during the terms. I don't know. I always felt like that's a little, I don't know the right word. It just, I mean, there's so many students that commit so much of their time and energy throughout the year to do so many amazing, wonderful things that I don't know. So it could go either way. I don't think it's a bad thing, but it could be seen depending on the rest of the application. So I was just, I don't know. Be aware and work hard to take opportunities and stuff. But if you're not doing anything outside of the summer, that concerns me a little bit.
Yeah, I think I had a conversation with the dean of admissions at a medical school last year, where the big kind of thing that jumps out at them when they see that sort of compartmentalization, hard word to say, of activities and classes is that a student can't handle. You can't handle the workload, right? And that especially a student asked the question of this dean. I was planning on taking a gap year and taking the MCAT when I'm done with my classes. And he said pretty quickly, our admissions team doesn't like to see that because, again, they're assuming you can't handle taking classes, doing your activities, taking the MCAT all at one time. I'm not necessarily a fan of that mentality, but this is where you get into the world that the admissions committees are made up of people and they have their opinions, and it may differ from our opinions, and that's okay as long as you understand that you're not going to be a good fit at every school. And so ultimately you need to do what you need to do, what's best for you, and what works for you. And that may be a turnoff for some of the schools out there.
Yeah, that's right.
All right. Let's see. Ruid. I have no research experience at all, but worked hard at other requirements and experiences. I originally was going to apply this cycle, but should I change my plan and apply next year with some research? Very common question. Dr. Scott Wright, is research required to get into medical school?
No, not at the vast majority of medical schools in this country. It is not required. The secondary question to that is, well, is it recommended? I mean, what I look at this is if you're interested in research, do some research, see what it's like, see what you think, and if you didn't like it, then okay, you didn't like it. If you really want to try it and you end up really liking it and want to take off another year and do some research, that's great. But again, and I hate to go back to this too frequently, but follow your heart is what I would say. I think students are so apt to look for external validation for the decisions they make. You do the things that are important to you and dive into them and really apply yourself in those things. And then when you get to the application, then you say, this is who I am. And these are the things that I've done that illustrate to you who I am. And so, to the question of should I do research? Maybe you should. Maybe you shouldn't. What do you want to do? So.
What do you want to do? That's a question that not enough people ask themselves, and they just do the things they think they have to do.
Yeah.
And then they end up in a world of hurt with their applications. Yep. Dr. Scott Wright, thank you for joining me on another scintillating episode of Pre-Med Office
Yay.
Hours.
It's been awesome.
Love hanging out with you. Where can people work with you and find out? I think maybe you have a little more spot. I know you are one of the advisors that fills up very quickly.
Well, we're working on that, but I do have some spots available, and I'm happy to work with students at whatever point they're starting at and whatever their struggles are or have been. I really enjoy working with a variety of students. I have a variety of interests myself, and so whatever you're bringing to the table, let's sit down and look at it and see what we can make out of it.
See what we can make. Medicalschoolhq.net is where you can go learn more about working with us. We have the advising tab, menu item, whatever. Click on that, and you can learn how you can work with us. Again, use the coupon code PMOH to save you $50 off of our one-time appointments, and I think it applies to essay editing as well. We'll see you next week. We're here almost every single Wednesday at 1 p.m. Eastern here at premed.tv. I hope you all have a wonderful day. Thanks, Dr. Wright.